Going.
I started jam.
I don't know. Yeah, no public comment. I see them. You got gum in my courtroom? I'm just kidding.
YouTube streaming on time.
Okay. Good.
The bad day if the department heads start coming up with public comment.
Exactly, yes, yes, it is.
Had that once here. Yeah, no, staff member. What's his name?
IT has left the building. In a minute, finance will walk in.
I know, finance.
I'm not gonna sit there. You prepared, look at all this stuff, just in case. Your ass. I brought a little paper.
I already gave you my 2 cents worth.
Yes. Okay, well, it's fine.
Find it.
The trees, right?
Run, run. Hey, you got like 25 seconds. You're not late.
Sorry.
You gotta go back and get all this drink though.
Okay.
Right. Good evening. Welcome to the study session of August 27th. Donna, you do a roll call, please.
Councilmember Blush.
Here.
Councilmember Stearns. Councilmember Gilmore.
Clear.
Marinesco.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Sherman.
Here.
Councilmember Sapp.
Here.
And Councilmember Gutierrez.
Here.
Thank you, Donna. Tonight, Finance Director Mike Givens has information for us about our 2025 budget. Mike, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and members of council. A long-awaited study session on the budget. So, City Manager, Mark asked me to just give you a little bit of an update on the audit that we had an exit conference on today. So if it's okay, I'll just start with that. We will be fully audited for fiscal years 22 and 23 in the coming weeks. They notified us. This was a federal funds audit. So on our annual financial report, we reported the federal money that we received primarily through that coronavirus recovery dollars that we had. We also received some other money for the designated crisis responders. Some of that money is reported because it's federal pass-through. We had a small amount through the Bureau of Justice for some bulletproof vests. So the auditor is coming in to check our expenditures related just to this federal money that we received. So this is a team effort. I just want to tell you, it's not one person doing this. Deputy Finance Director Terry Snitzer and our grants and budget manager, Don Quisme, who's here in the audience, are a huge part of this, as well as other finance staff. So Terry's the primary one who prepares the annual financial report. That's where these dollars are reported. The auditor determines that we're above a certain level and need a single audit on this. So they came in and looked at this. They pulled some samples of what we spent money on. They asked us specifically, we had, when we initially received that coronavirus money, we'll just call it that. It was a pretty, a much more narrow scope that you were allowed to spend it on as a public agency than it later opened up to be, which pretty much was any place where you could show you lost revenue. A good governmental purpose, I'll just say that. So they were looking at, how did you say you spent this and did you spend it in that way? We had in 2023 put about $500,000 towards street maintenance and operations. So they looked at a large sampling from that. I can tell you that we gave them quite a bit of data on where we had spent money, including payroll records. They looked very thoroughly, and I'm pleased to tell you we had a clean audit, if you will. There were no issues that they had. I can't express enough that it's a team effort because we're, you know, it's not just finance who's doing that. It's managers and other directors, particularly in public works, who were spending this money appropriately in a good way. So it's good to come through this. It's a very positive thing for the city whenever we get a clean audit that we're responsible to our taxpayers who give us this money. I mean, this was federal money, so it's coming from a federal source, but that's all everyone paid tax money. So that's what the exit interview was about today. Will be audited on fiscal years 22 and 23, as I mentioned. They expect to kick that off next month. So that will be looking at all city funds. From the general fund through all of our enterprise funds. They'll start looking at our financial statements and making sure those tie out and everything's appropriate, and then they'll do some sampling. We'll know more about that when it happens. They're estimating the cost of that audit to be somewhere in the low $50,000 range. So we do pay to be audited by the state auditor, but it's important that you know we're taking it very seriously and we're very hard to make sure we're complying in every area. And it's always good to be able to report out that clean audit report. The exit conference, just so you know, I'll speak for Don. As you're living through the audit, you feel like you're really working hard, and then the exit conference is about 3 minutes where they can say, everything's good, thank you, and kind of go through that, and you're a little bit like.
It's a lot of pomp and circumstance, really, to check some boxes for the SAOs.
So anyway, that's what the exit conference was, and you know, we had a lot of money reported. I'm just gonna say $1.2 million as a percent of our budget isn't necessarily a lot, but it was money that we put towards a lot of different projects. I just mentioned the street fund. We had spent some of that money towards the Western Gateway project. The auditors just pick a sampling of what they're going to look at. Some of the money went towards Veterans Village. So the reclaim tank. Well, one, so a little bit of this money went to different things. They mostly focused on where the majority was spent, which was that $500,000. So that's that. So now.
Well, I'd like to thank you and your staff for, you know, I've attended probably 5 or 6 out of the last 7 exit interviews or audits, and they've always interviews. Am I out of here? That have been all great. So it's, you know, it's hard work, but you and your staff keep track of that. I know it's been great. So thank you.
Fiduciary responsibility to our ratepayers and our taxpayers, right? So
Yeah.
happy to be able to provide that and have that assurance from SAO that it's a job well done.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I agree, Mayor. It's great to have a strong staff within the finance department, our departments that take these things seriously. You know, mine, I'm gonna kind of kick us off here, and then I think it'll be a little bit back and forth between Mike and I, but tonight we're gonna focus on the general fund budget. We'll certainly discuss utilities, enterprise funds, but there's still some reconciliation from 2024 that needs to happen. And you know, these funds based on rates and general facility charges for operations and projects are, I guess, a little more succinct than the general fund, and they're, as in they're specific to the functions of those departments. So on the tenth of September, we're going to focus the study session on the capital improvement program, so we'll dive a little bit more into that specific element within each of these funds. And we'll certainly have, I think, give the council a better understanding of the projects that are leading up to some of the expenditures within those departments. But we're happy to discuss that tonight. We'll certainly focus on the general fund. So amongst other things tonight, we'll talk about the anticipated revenue and projected expenditures in 2025. What we've done with the information we have at hand, right? Essentially, what we're doing is taking a little bit of a history where we are to date, projecting that into 2025. What we've done is we provided our departments with a baseline budget, so the 2024 budget transferred over to 2025. We take all the one-time expenses away from that and ask for new requests that may add to programming, projects, or just inflationary increase or anything like that. So you'll see a list of kind of the needs within your packet. We won't go through those, I think each one specifically, but we'll highlight some of those tonight so you have a better understanding of what's come from each department. I think you'll see that the requests are reasonable. We haven't seen requests that are highly aspirational, if you will, or adding a lot of new programs just because we don't have the capacity to do that. Many of you heard and have heard that, we're anticipating, our revenues to slowly increase or stay fairly flat and at a much lesser rate than our expenditures. So we need to be conscious of that moving into 2025 as well, particularly with ongoing expenses, which primarily are staffing, salaries, wages, and things like that. So you'll, as you've seen in as well in the monthly budget reports, an in-fund balance that is quite healthy at this point. We need to be conscious of how that is best used to provide services to the community and not use those for ongoing expenses the best we can, but make sure we meet council's strategic goals. Again, I guess along with that, right now, as I mentioned in the 2023 budget, or excuse me, in the 2023 and adopting and developing the 2024 budget, being strategic and planning and forward planning starts taking a back role to daily functions. And that's a lot of what our department heads and senior staff are doing along with our line level staff. So that's a concern moving forward. You'll see that a little bit within the budget, that there's requests for staffing, administrative assistants, patrol officers and things like that, that we're not recommending moving forward on. That means that that budget isn't able to, at least for ongoing expenses, able to satisfy some of those needs. And that means that department level directors, managers, supervisors are taking on a lot of those day-to-day functions, particularly when we have absences, because we don't have a lot of redundant positions. Many of the positions at the city of Shelburne are singular employees. So if somebody's not here, vacation, sick, we still want the work to get done. We don't want to push that out. So somebody's backfilling, taking on those roles. So tonight, again, open study session. Hope to have as many questions from you as possible. We'll try to get you as many answers here tonight, but we're prepared to come back to you at a later date if we need to. But knowing that we are moving kind of, I don't know, it's a fast path, but it's we're chugging along to a November 5th council meeting for a public hearing adoption of the 25 budget, and moving forward into what is quickly going to be the end of the year, 2025 right around. So in front of you is the proposed budget calendar. We are on target, I guess. Yeah. For the most part, leading up to today's council study session, the first council study session, plan on taking your input back to our departments, making any adjustments that we can at that point, refining that budget through the first week of September, and that gives finance department the opportunity to further package this into a preliminary budget that can be presented to council again in November. Anything else on the calendar, Mike?
No, I think, we're looking at a November public hearing and adoption, and then probably bringing a supplemental to you for consideration on the 2024 budget, simply because there's some cleanup things we have to do. We didn't want to mix those because it's confusing, I think, to the public as well, if we trying to adopt next year's and fix this year's. There's just some revenue and expenditures we need to reconcile. Things happen that we don't know about when we adopt the budget, so you'll notice we plan for that in December. So you're gonna hear a lot about budget in the next 4 months.
Yes, we all are.
Very good.
I thought we'd start tonight talking about the financial sustainability task force recommendations. This was formed back in 2023, prior to my tenure here as city manager. We had a small group of local residents, proprietors of local businesses that assisted the city and did a thorough review of operations and the financial resources we had available to conduct the services. I think over the overarching sentiment recommendations were that really they were surprised that we could perform as many functions as we do, with the resources we have available to us. That continues to be the case, particularly after some of the reductions we made after the financial statement task force adjourned and the adoption of the 24 budget. So I thought I would just go through some of these recommendations to show the council how we really enacted most of these recommendations to help streamline functions. We'll start at the top. We had I think a $1 million allocation for jail services last year. That was going to come out of reserves, and recommendation was we don't continue to do that. It's on ongoing expenses. So we didn't realize the totality of that $1 million allocation, and that's one of the reasons why the end fund balance is a little more robust than what we anticipated back in 23. But we continue to monitor this because the costs don't decrease, right? They continue to increase. Number 2 on there was outsourcing, divesting animal shelter and animal control functions. We went back to council about this. The certainly interest in the council to maintain some animal control services of some sort. This will be a discussion as we kind of get to the end and we talk about some of these projects and programs, but that hasn't been fully realized. We reached out with the RFQ published, I don't know the date, earlier this year, right? For animal control services, and we got no responses for that. B&O tax adjustment, council took action last year on that. We've continuously been updating the website, trying to add more information directly to the website and reduce some of the staff time and create efficiencies for our customers. Office of Public Defender grant, I thank Judge Greer and Court Administrator Diane Smolinski for continuing to apply for these grant funds to offset costs out of municipal court. Water and sewer rates, council fully considered those again last year in adopting rates that would make our water and sewer rates or departments able to provide the necessary services and operations, but also address some of the capital projects that are coming online that could very well stifle development. We have not had the opportunity to discuss the public safety sales tax with the county at this point. Voter approved bond to meet capital improvement for parks. Again, that has not been something that's been provided to council, been discussed with council at this point. The C Street landfill, as you recently saw, us close that out. We've signed the agreement to monitor services there. Been quite successful receiving grant funds and moving into the second year of monitoring. After that, it's on the city's dime. Again, with parks, the SMPD levy lift, there's a recommendation to increase that up to the maximum 75 cents per 1,000. That would be a voter approved levy, and we have not brought that back to council either. Proactive code enforcement. This is seen as taking some of the blights away from the neighborhoods, increasing property values, making them more livable. With the council's commitment last year to an $80,000 abatement fund, we've obviously had some success at 1411 Railroad, but we've also recently gone through some other abatement hearings and may very well see some total abatements or some voluntary compliance based on those actions as well. But we have an active code enforcement officer now. The grant writer position.
You missed 12.
Did I miss 12? Oh, annotation for economic development purpose, sorry. There's two ways to go about annexation. There's application or there's city proposed annexation. We have the Olympic Heights development, 400 acres that were annexed last year. We have grading permits out for the first phase of 199 houses. The civil plans are in place, but we have not gone out to proactively seek annexation in what might be commercial industrial areas that are better employment centers or job producers at this time. Mayor. Again, back to the grant writer, we haven't fully funded a position such as grant writer. The one problem that we are facing right now, frankly, is we've been fairly successful in getting either grant funds or direct appropriations. And having the staff to bring some of those projects to fruition has not occurred. We're dealing with some grant funds from 2021 right now. And as we sit on those funds, they lose their buying power. And so we really need to be strategic on how we receive these funds and how we put them into practice. We recently agreed with the Port of Shelton that we would take on the sewer line extension on Spring Road. The port applied for the grant funds. It's obviously not on port property. It's from the high school out to 101. They didn't receive the whole $2.8 million, I believe. It was just under $1 million, so it can really pay for design. We've agreed to take that project on. It'll happen next year in 2025. So these projects keep coming on board. We need staffing and the resources available to put some of this money into the ground and make it real. So we need to be strategic. Outsourcing versus insourcing services. I mean, we talked about public safety. I think you heard a report on IT not too long ago with Right Systems. So we've been doing that on a regular basis. We have a number of engineering contracts that are out. We don't have a city engineer on staff now, so that some of those services are being provided. We also have staff that have taken on some of those roles and stepped up to the plate, done a great job with that as well. So we're happy that saves a little money from contracting out, but there's certain services that we just aren't capable of performing in-house. One of those is public safety and police. We reached out to a few communities and contracted with sheriff's departments, mostly in King County and similar sized cities with similar sized staffing. The cost to provide those services contract was more than what we're committing to public safety right now. So we think we have essentially addressed most of those recommendations in a way that we've either taken action on those or fully satisfied that we're performing those functions to the best of our ability and available resources. Number 16, reduce infrastructure, divest of buildings. We'll talk a little bit more about that. That's specifically around the library, museum. Those are buildings on the fire station. Those are buildings that aren't, that are under city ownership that aren't city services, specific city services. Number 17, that's a project that's ongoing right now. The PD is committed to replacing, at least on Railroad Avenue, streetlights to LED lights. That'll be a cost savings to the city. There's going to be some upgrades on those and a little bit of maintenance to make those look better and function better lighting, as well as cheaper to run. Design specifications, that's been something that's been ongoing the last year and a half or so. We've updated the street standards. There's sewer and water standards that are ongoing. Those are dynamic processes. You don't complete those and set them on the shelf and they're good forever, right? We have to continue reviewing those best practices. There's conditions in our community that change, whether it's a certain elevation, street, whatever condition that might be. These specifications need to be addressed and updated on a regular basis. So that's kind of an ongoing deal. The 6-year tip with impact fee levels, again, that's been addressed and appropriately adopted by the council. City surplus land, we do have land available. That's a broader conversation. We talked about it a little bit. Most of the property we have is not readily available for development, but there is some opportunities up on North 13th Street. We've talked about some Harvard Avenue properties that have already been declared surplus. We've talked to some affordable housing providers about that. There is some interest, but there's some constraints there too, and whether it's feasible for them to provide housing there. So we're going to continue talking about that. Electronic records management. We still have work to do there. It's a fairly big lift because you are backfilling and scanning all of the information. The last estimate was about $150,000 investment into that. So again, you'll see that in one of the requests in the budget, but hasn't risen to the top yet. Setting overall fees at a level to sufficiently recover costs of operations. We update our fee schedule on an annual basis. We'll be bringing a fee schedule to this council by the end of the year. Again, with backup on why the fees are established such as they are, why any changes might be made. So we review those based on staff time and expenses that we have internally and how those are distributed out for the projects or programs they may be associated with. Annexation to Central Mason Fire. That Central Mason has gone through 2 annexations in the last year and a half or 2 years. The city of Shelton is a natural step. It's just got to be the right timing and what that annexation looks like. We're currently collecting an EMS levy, and that's basically transferred to Central Mason. And then fire services are paid for out of the general fund. So Central Mason through an annexation would collect their own fees within the city of Shelton. The city would not collect those or potentially collect those for other purposes, depending on the council's desire. More needs within our parks department, the playground at Neyland Park, skate park replacement. We have a gravel parking lot up at Callahan without ADA accessibility. So these are capital improvements that are ongoing and needs within the park system. Again, either park impact fees or levy lid lifts could address those in the future. The 26, the ship staffing local partnerships. There's just not a whole lot of capacity there. A lot of recreation programs are self-sufficient, so they pay for themselves as well. They might not be, particularly some adult program that we do isn't available through the YMCA or other organizations that we're filling like a softball league, things like that. So volleyball leagues and things like that. So we believe we have a value to the community and quality of life programming that continues to be provided here through the Parks and Recreation Department. The rates for customers outside the city limits, we basically have to show that there's an additional cost to providing the service. So for a water customer that is outside the city limits, we have to show there's an additional cost there. We have been able to essentially prove that at this point. So the conveyance is essentially the same 20, 40, 50 feet away for that rate. So the SMP, the Adopt a Park program, we've had some success with Shelton Youth Connection and Shelton Rotary at Hubbard Trail, Neyland Park, Teresa Johnson, Skate Park, areas like that. So that's a great partnership and great partnerships to build within our community. The process and the investment in the tools to deliver the service, I think we'll talk about that a little more with vehicles, but that's an ongoing, improvement process and analysis that we do throughout our departments. Is this equipment, are these tools that we really need to do our job? Are they necessary? Can we do it better in another way? As we implement technology, hopefully create efficiencies. And that's one thing we talked about in developing this budget and the requests. Are these requests going to create efficiencies for our departments? They're going to meet strategic goals of public safety or maintaining our assets. And so we review those on a regular basis throughout the departments as finance and myself. Sales tax options available to cities. We've talked a little about the affordable housing sales tax, and that's really other than like a public facilities district or convention center district that are available for sales tax options, so. The subcommittee talked about that a little bit, so that's on my list to talk about kind of as we get through some of the long-term, well, I guess they're short-term and long-term decisions. Fully fund vehicle replacement, again, we'll touch on that, the options between our existing equipment replacement program, which is fund the purchase once, or maybe a enterprise fleet management system, which you're paying over time, basically, for these vehicles. So you reduce that upfront cost, and you can provide a better fleet for their police department. The planner position, we all know that that's kind of that can be a linchpin development if you don't get the development plans off of the table. And it's certainly something we need to look at as we see some of the development coming on the horizon. Olympic Heights, once the Olympic Ridge for some reason, and Coffee Creek, if they kind of get anytime soon. So, any questions there? Okay, no, there's a bunch of information there. We spent 4, 5, 6 months, Mike, with the committee on that project.
Yeah, it was a good, pretty much from January through June, working with them on that, the development of that. They worked really hard and gave it a lot of thorough thought.
Do you want to then jump in about
Yes.
anticipated?
So as Mark mentioned, we're primarily focused on the general fund. At the study session on September 10th, you're going to hear more about the capital improvement plan, which really focuses a lot around the enterprise funds. So the general fund revenue, quite honestly, you see it in the monthly report. It just doesn't vary a lot. There's a couple of increases that happen. One of them is the property tax, 1% increase. That's just to give you an idea in the general fund, it's not more than $40,000. So it's just not an increase that keeps up with our costs. When you look at the general fund revenue at just over $15 million, I'll tell you, I'm pretty conservative in where I make increases, but there aren't that many places to really speculate. One of the places that we're still a little bit unsure of is that business and occupation tax revenue. We increased it, but it takes a while for that to come through in the way that all of our businesses report. So I'm trying to make sure that the forecast isn't greater than what we're going to actually realize. My hope is that as 2025 unfolds, it proves that there's a little bit more capacity in there, but we'll see where that happens. So it's the revenue budget is at just over $15 million. As Mark said, when we set up the expenditure budget, finance goes through and applies increases to personnel across all departments. So where we're estimating benefits to increase, healthcare, et cetera, and then any kind of salary increase. And we're, again, pretty modest in where we're putting that, but we're estimating some sort of cost of living adjustment plus a step for those employees that are eligible. We take away any one-time expenditures. So where we might have had something that was brought into the 24 budget as a one-time, we back that out and then bring everything forward. So we gave no increase for professional services, supplies, et cetera. And as you know, costs are going up. So everybody's living within that means. That brought our expenditure budget at just over $15,238,000. So going into the budget, we have a difference where, and I'm specifically labeling this ongoing expenditure. So that ongoing expense exceeds our revenue by over $181,000. So all of those costs in the general fund, as you see, monthly are for everything from animal control to human resources, city council to everything in between that. So, one of the things we'll talk about is the fact that the general fund contributes to street maintenance and operations. And so I put that line in there because in order to fund street operations at where it's anticipated right now, just again, staffing costs and then bringing everything forward, we're going to need to transfer $595,311 to make that happen. And that's dedicating all of our transportation benefit district sales tax towards street operations as well. So that means that our general fund expenses exceed revenue by over $776,000 at this time. So I think what we want to do now is take you through some of the requests, because I've given a rather bleak picture on that, but we know there are more requests out there and we need to take a look at those, because Mark and I sat yesterday again looking at the requests. Some of these requests, really most of them, quite frankly, aren't well, can we fund those? But some of them are, quite frankly, we have to, because they're either requests that we legally have to fund, or the costs of doing business that aren't included in the budget, and we're going to have to pay them one way or the other. So we have two kind of some priorities on this. A priority one list of requests that's $595,000, staffing requests that total $805,000. And then we made a priority two. It's not that they're less important, but we simply had to try to divide this out, and that totals $151,000. So did you want me to highlight some of those, or?
Yeah, we can, yeah.
Show where some of those are.
Please.
So these are not by order of importance, it's simply by how they follow the budget numbering system. So animal control, those costs are not adequately budgeted in the 2024 budget. We're exceeding budget on those, so we know that we need to add some budget to these to just meet where we're at currently. These are, again, an example of where I say we put them in additional budget requests over baseline, but we're spending the money, so it's not really an option at this point. If we continue these services at the level they are now, we need this added in there. You can kind of see down, again, these columns we've divided into priority one, priority two, and then staffing sort of requests. You want me to highlight anything in particular, Mark?
Let's just,
Do you wanna?
well,
go through all
I
of them?
mean, the building inspector, the assistant planner are they're really intended to meet the growth, you know, that's on the horizon. We'll realize revenue obviously with that growth, but we need to be nimble enough that we don't wait until it's already here. Building permits are lagging, development is lagging, we don't realize the revenue and the growth that we really need, so we're not gonna recommend actually filling those at this point, but they should be addressed. They need to be on our radar.
Have we done a comparison of what it costs us to outsource this work, which we're doing? I mean,
Nobody out there.
well, we are using using code pros to do the building inspection.
Yeah,
Right.
they're 4 months behind on their building permits right now. That's why.
Okay. I just
Yeah.
meant,
Yeah,
for-
sorry, I think they take 80% of the building permit fee. Yeah, good point.
so this 74,000, is this fully loaded or just a salary?
No,
Salary,
Yeah.
I mean. I would probably put that back in priority one, since if we're paying 80% of the
I mean-
permit fees to a third party,
Well-
that's 4 months behind.
well, we can't fill the building official position. We filled it with an inspector. Now Doug's jumping in both feet.
Yeah.
In October, he's going, he's gonna receive a couple more certs. So we've got a plan at least to bring in residential permits, and
Yeah.
keep that revenue in-house. The commercial permits will still have to go out. And so we need to work up to that, but hiring building officials right now is essentially impossible. There's so much call on the I-5 corridor at much higher salary. You'll see some contracts on the 3rd of September for 3 firms. an addition to the co-pros that we're using now to provide some more flexibility for getting these permits turned over, because that time is money for these developers. We want them in, want them out, we want them building right away. The longer they sit in the queue, the less benefit there is to us. So, yeah, we're working on that. On the planning side of things, we've seen that with the comprehensive plan. Those planners doing long range planning, the same ones doing local planning and day-to-day planning, and there just aren't enough available out there, same as engineering services. It's a difficult fill. The 0.5 admin assistant position, we currently have admin support. One admin support position split between public works and the clerk's office. It's a burden on both departments, and so obviously addressing a need there to increase admin support to provide additional services. Again, if Donna is on vacation, God forbid, we need some support and backup. The compensation study is a wage and benefit study. We're seeing recruitments all across the state, and these recruitments quite often from recruitment firms that are hired, and they're going back out with a higher salary, higher wage classification. That's what our staff see. That's what the market is. We need to determine what that is with our comparables. We can't compete with the I-5 corridor necessarily, but we need to know what that is. And frankly, our staff, even if we can't compensate them to this, we need to understand where that is and where it may go in the future. That hasn't been done in many, many years. We do that compensation study and comparables with our unions quite a bit, but we don't do a full with our non-represented staff. The $8,000 election costs are the potential for TBD. If the council so elected to put the transportation benefit district on the ballot in 2025, that's our anticipated costs. On the second page, you'll see some grant writer services on priority 2. There's things like the oil changes in the elevators in city facilities, $40,000. We have to do it. It's a requirement of L&I to perform these maintenance functions. We've got some HVAC units that are failing in the museum. Again, an asset of ours that provides a critical public service, but it's not necessarily, it's a city asset, but we're not functioning out of there. We've got an HVAC unit in the animal shelter. It's not air conditioned back in the kennels, so it's really hot. It gets really hot back there. Automatic doors for police and courtroom, those aren't ADA accessible. So the entrance door you see out here, you have to pull it open. It's not accessible. So retrofitting those with automatic openers. We have an old phone system in here. We'd like to address replacing that with what is it, phone over IP or some other system like that. Computer replacements. Many of our computers were, especially laptops, were purchased at the start of the COVID pandemic to address work from home issues. I think the recommended replacement is about 5 years.
Yes, and some of our windows will be out of
Windows
life next year.
is out of life, so we're getting close to that. Windows licensing, cybersecurity infrastructure, again, needed. Mike can talk about IT a little more succinctly than I can, but there's needed services that we just can't do without. Smarsh, Revise, Signature 365. Smarsh is our platform that records text messages, social media platforms, and retains that for public records purposes. You'll see things on here like procurement software for $1,500 or new check printer for $35. Now, you might say, just go do those this year, and that'd be nice. There might be some savings this year. We're not done with the budget. We need to have our priority services supplied this year. If we have some in-fund balance this year, we certainly would make those purchases. But the level of these requests just kind of shows you the necessity that's been demonstrated from our departments. let's see. I think one other one that I wanted to point out, finance at the bottom of the page, B&O limited term analyst. We talked about when the B&O tax was changed last year about reconciling. Who's paying that B&O tax? Are they paying the right amount? Are there businesses that aren't paying? Do we have equity across all businesses? Are the ones that are honest and the ones that might not be paying, or they just don't know, right? That we've missed at some point, they don't have a business license. How do we reconcile that? How do we have equity throughout that? We talked about hiring maybe a limited term person to come in and do that. We actually have a meeting tomorrow with the company that may come in and provide that service, and do it, you know, for whatever cost, but essentially they're set up, they're more efficient, they have a plan, they have a program in place. So we're still exploring opportunities to do that. Would it raise revenue? We're not sure, but we want to ensure that that this is being, the B&O tax is being applied equitably across all businesses in our community. And then the other staffing position is an HR technician, somebody to assist in human resources and risk management. In municipal court, a lot of these are just bringing budget lines back in line with what was approved at the beginning of 2023. We made some adjustments and cuts at the beginning of 24. So the municipal court has just asked to add some of these expenses back in. We'll see some overtime increases. They have a new software that they have to implement coming this fall, I believe. And Office Administrative Courts comes in for a week and helps implement that. And it's basically their long days. So we'll be paying some overtime for people to be doing that. That could run into the following year as well. Parks are offset to Shelton Municipal Park District funds, but they're captured within the expense budget here. Just increased costs and some park improvements that are included there. The police, the capital purchase is a police vehicle, one police vehicle at 76,213. And then you move on down, we have the flop cameras, inventory, small equipment, their firearms or sidearms are due for replacement. So that 18,000 is included in there. They have additional training requirements that need to be updated. The SWAT line item is adding another officer into the county SWAT program. And it's an opportunity for further training. Another officer, we have one officer within the SWAT program. I believe it serves also as a retention opportunity. You know, if somebody's interested in SWAT and they have that opportunity to move into it here at the city of Shelton or move on to another department where they could get that opportunity. Hopefully they stay here and take advantage of that. Uniform invest, we've been lucky enough in the past to receive some grant funds for that and offset that, but it's certainly something that we need to provide to them. In engineering, construction inspector is important, particularly when these subdivisions start kicking off. We're looking at grades and utilities going in the ground and streets going in and sidewalks going in and all of those things that are done before the houses are actually built. They meet city standards and they're going to function, not going to impact the city long term because we acquire that infrastructure after it's complete. So we want to make sure it's built to our standards. So there's construction inspector included within there. And then you'll see the lease for vehicles. Those are what we anticipate if we move to a fleet management program like Enterprise. Really quickly through those requests, Mike, did you have anything else you thought might be pointed out that I skipped over?
Okay. Yeah, gives you a sense for the kinds of essentials really that departments are requesting. It's pretty basic. To do the work kinds of requests, I think.
Yeah.
So those are the totals that put in there. Great, so I think we want to move now to talk a little bit about the ending fund balance.
Yes.
That we've um, alluded to. I think I talked about it in most monthly financial report presentations. It looks like it's a fairly decent amount of money. But when you really start to break it down and think about what we have to spend on it, goes pretty quickly. I also want to say, we don't have to spend it all. There's no requirement that we do. We've met our council statutory set aside, which is that 20% of prior year expenditures. So that set aside, and then this amount exists. But as you can tell, we don't have enough revenue coming in next year to meet our expenditures. So we've worked hard to develop a plan for this money, because we need to plan for how we're going to spend it or allocate it at some level. And so that's what this effort is. Again, we came up with a first priority list and a second priority list, because the list totals more than what the ending fund balance has in it. I think I have a breakdown on this next page that maybe I should start with a little bit, just to take you through it. So our projected general fund ending balance is just over 0.9 million. So you back out the $3,113,054, which is that reserved amount we need to set aside. And that leaves us with $2.8 million to allocate, if you will, wherever we might. So I'm taking out, as you know, the city has received opioid settlement dollars. That's sitting in the general fund right now that has a specific purpose that it has to be spent for. So we want to make sure that's segregated, because we have an obligation to spend it in the direction that the settlement guides us towards. So that's just over $192,000. And we called these proposed strategic efficiency funding options for that ending fund unreserved balance. So if you take the option number one, and then we took the variance for 2025 out of that, it brings it down to just $508,000 left in there. And I think we want to be cautious to tell you, if we're funding that variance out of the ending fund balance, the ending fund balance is one-time money. It's not ongoing revenue. That's why I distinguish that ongoing revenue, ongoing expenditures. So that's the challenge that we all face, is we have increased ongoing expenditures that our revenue needs. So I'll scroll back up so we can talk a little about this, Mark.
Yeah,
Where the
Please.
where our first priority list comes from.
And we can be, well, one could be perspective with some of the development on the horizon. If truly had 199 houses going through grading right now, infrastructure improvements through the winter and going vertical next year, great. I mean, that adds revenue to us. As Mike said, we want to face this budget with caution. We don't want to end up we're pulling back on the reins a little bit. We'd much rather go in, and if we have additional revenue, we're adding to the services we provide into our community that backing our services. So again, this is approached cautiously, but again, reducing staff at any level right now, I think would reduce the services significantly that we're providing to our community. So maintaining public safety, maintaining our infrastructure, and being proactive with development and investment in our community are our priorities. The first line item here, you see transferring $400,000 to maintain staffing levels in 2025 would be essentially the top priority in my mind. Again, we're open to feedback here throughout the evening. The enterprise vehicle fund. The one thing enterprise does is it provides you a lower initial payment. You're paying essentially a payments leases for these vehicles over time. And it could be 5 years for an F-150 pickup. It could be a little longer for a police vehicle. The issue is, we don't want to commit to 4 police vehicles in 2025 at a cost of about $100,000 and get to 2027 and not have the revenue to pay those lease payments again. And then we're cutting something else because we've committed to making these payments on these vehicles. So we know we need police vehicles. We know we've got police vehicles. We're spending, close to $50,000 annually on maintenance and repairs on these things. We can lower that, potentially see some savings depending on how many police vehicles are purchased. It's about response. It's about, I think, employee retention as well at the same time. You have a decent police vehicle, or if you have a piece of junk and your neighboring entity has a nice vehicle and you can go over there and drive that one, you might be more inclined to move to that jurisdiction. So the 500,000 is set aside to maintain the ability to purchase vehicles through a fleet management program. There's also more efficiencies with the fleet management program. They do the purchasing, they do the outfitting, they do the surplusing and sale of those vehicles as well.
Maintenance.
Licensing, they schedule the maintenance as well. They have ASC certified staff that can essentially argue on your behalf with garages potentially. But also right now it's up to the department to go through the purchasing of these vehicles. Finance department then licenses these vehicles. Once they're surplus, the finance department again takes the vehicle off, not necessarily off the surplus or off of our infrastructure or asset list, but manages those and to arrange those to get on the state surplus list. They go over to Tumwater, they get sold off, they tell us when they're sold, they take them off the list again. It's just a little more work and create a little more, some more efficiencies, if you will. We've looked at what this, internally, what the replacement would be. Like I said, $76,000 for one police vehicle. Next year, I think this year we bought one that's really close to 80 once you outfitted it. And it's somewhere right about for 4 vehicles next year. So right at $100,000 in
Yes.
police vehicles. So, and again, you don't have to go all the way in with 4 vehicles, but those are one of the options that we're looking at to maintain a fleet that has aged over time. And we bought several used police vehicles over several years too. 70 or 80,000 miles from one jurisdiction becomes a new vehicle for the city of Shelton.
That's a one-time expense of 500,000. That's not ongoing. And there's lease payments out there.
Correct, there's lease payments. We hope to budget those lease payments in annual budget. That's set aside for the future if we get into a situation where those lease payments are hard to make. And so we've got a fund that's set aside for that. Now, if we make it 3-4 years down the road, we have some residential development, commercial development, and our revenue, our general fund revenue increases, and we can maintain those lease payments. That's great. This can be allocated someplace else, but I don't want to cut some services to maintain a fleet.
And I think really we're trying to plan for the future so that we're not handing this off to future managers, generations, councils, and saying, well, we started it, good luck with it. We're trying to really say, here's, we looked at enterprise really closely. Mason County uses it. They speak very highly of it. They're very happy with it. So we're not concerned about the program. It's just making sure we can pay for it.
So it's a protected line item that's going to be in the budget for the next several years, regardless of
That's the intent.
other councils that want to pull from it. Would it be protected?
Well, the council has discretion. It's staff's job to communicate what the implications are. It's someplace else. Secure parking lot underneath that, the costs over what the grant has provided to complete that project. We are nearing the finish line, at least to go out to bid on that. So that's the anticipated additional costs to finish that project. I will caveat this is we've done a little more research about REIT, real estate excise tax funding, and how that can be applied to some projects. And we may have the ability to apply that to a couple of these projects and relieve the general fund of some of these projects. Civic Center duct cleaning, that's a healthy work environment, hasn't been done in 25 years. We do regular filter replacement with all of our HVAC units, but getting in and actually cleaning out some of the ductwork is warranted. We have an alarm panel in here that's 25 years old. It's into life. It's ready to quit on us, and we'll have to do it. If we're not proactive, we'll have to be reactive and change that out, much as we were at the library last year. And running on me, yeah, last year. Again, some library duct cleaning on the HVAC units there, wastewater treatment plant duct cleaning, that would actually not come out of the general fund. That would be something that would be paid for out of the utility. Again, you see the phone system again over in priority 2. We just didn't put it up there. We feel like that's one of the things we'll limp along. We don't have wholesale failures at this point, but again, it's if it happens, we're going to have to address it. I'd much rather be proactive in maintaining some of these assets, but we'll limp that along as much as we can. You had a study session on emergency management. We need to put some skin in the game, if you will. We need to really develop our coop. We need to put some more work into how we're going to address emergency management in this community and be prepared for when the time comes. So there's some resources that are needed to put towards that. We need to clean our carpets, amazingly enough. Sounds pretty simple, but again, our facilities budget, as that's a one-time cost, rather, we have a budget as an ongoing cost. It's included in this list. We have some grant funding for access control for doors and gates and cameras. That's a direct appropriation from the state. We estimated that to be around $500,000 to fully implement throughout the city. We got 250. We wanted to throw a little more at that, but at this point, we're recommending we just wait, get the 250 spent, get this thing implemented, see what our actual needs are, and then we can implement these as time goes on. There's the records retention and system, electronic records retention system at 150. Library deck, it's a tough one. We went out to bid recently, received no bids on this project. So this is replacement of the waterproof membrane railings on the deck that would allow public access. Actually, the main deck and the 2 side decks. We got no bids, so great. We can go out and solicit bids. We haven't had many contractors interested in that. We've got a couple bids. They're really close in price to each other, but it takes about another $100,000 to complete the project. We could wait. We lose buying power on the $70,000 grant that we have. Or we can move forward and put some more funds to it. We lose buying power and we see further degradation of the deck system underneath. So at this point, my recommendation is, and again, that's probably, I think that's something we could potentially fund through REIT as well, since we have fund balance within the REIT fund. And then you see everything else on the side, the seismic study for our buildings that kind of follows along with emergency management, scanning documents. We've got file cabinets full of hard copies and documents. So scanning those into a system that manages that, adds room to our building. If we ever need to add staff, we're not, first and foremost, utilizing the space that we have rather than going someplace else. And maintaining services in one location by getting rid of these hard copies, getting them out there. Creative district funding, I think there will be an LTAP application to continue that. So that's why that's kind of on the second priority. And the others are recreational, the playground at Neon Park. I wish the SMPD could support the full scale replacement of that. It is 28 years old or so now, 20-year lifespan. So we're limping along. We're going to seal it here in another week and a half, again, to keep the water intrusion out of that wood structure, but they just don't last forever in the Northwest. So it's our signature community park. It'd be nice to dedicate some resources and replace that. talked about the Civic Center storefront, the front doors, kind of a side entrance into the courtroom, so they could separate out court functions from the main Civic Center. Lessons of security measures that they have to take as well, again, kind of on the back burner. We've talked a lot about the new Public Works yard shop. Again, kind of goes along with emergency management. We're at the foot of the hill there. We've got old structures, again, and seismic study. Old structures there. We've got some property up on the north side of town that could be utilized for a function like this. It's just how do you fund it? How do you implement that? If we get, Cascadia earthquake, at the foot of that hill, the fear is that those operations essentially cease if all of our equipment's still down there. We've got equipment and people split up amongst treatment plants and down this existing shop. This is also a way to address the police department's evidence storage. Right now, again, that's scattered throughout the city, containers, unsecured, shouldn't say unsecured, less than optimal security at some of these locations. But we have the need to maintain some evidence for many years if they're capital crimes. It's through the life of any appeals process. So we have a few vehicles in storage containers and maintaining those for some time. So we've got it in this building, we've got it down the dog pound, we've got it at the wastewater treatment plant. It'd be nice to consolidate those, have a system where we can manage that evidence long term. The last one on the list is creating a dais for the council. So the 7 council members could sit at a dais rather than tables on the floor. Create space for all staff to present from tables, have adequate audio visual systems and things like that, and meet court's needs. But again, I think I've heard from council previously on keeping that on the list just because it was of interest, but heard from council previously that that hasn't risen to the top of the list by any means. So that sums up what what we entail in that unreserved general fund balance and potential projects.
So we've given you a presentation on kind of where the general fund has this variance. I think at this point, we're looking for comments, questions, and direction from you all on, what do we do? We've got a variance, as we said, of just over $770,000. We know we met with our subcommittee that are 3 members of this body. But we're looking at some comments that they made, and really, if we can try to continue everything as we're doing today, that's the cost. But is it sustainable, and what do we look at to make sure that the general fund can do all this going into the future?
Yeah, maybe I'll lead in with some of the comments from the subcommittee, if you don't mind. Those will kind of be starting points. We'll go back to the shop. There's consensus that that's a need. It's just how we pay for it. Incrementally, we've set some money aside through our utility accounts and the general fund to maybe address this. So you could do some grading, some fencing improvements, start with that, and then look further down the road. Jay, what's the total ballpark estimate right now?
$8 to $9 million.
$8 to $9 million. So yeah, it doesn't happen overnight, certainly. But we could address that over time. It's maintaining, some of the other priorities with those, with that project looming at the same time as are the decisions. We talked about animal control, certainly looking for partners. I reached out to Mark Neary at the county again, asked if they would be interested in a partnership there. I haven't heard back, so we'll see if something comes from them.
And what happened in Grayview, they are open to discussion.
Yeah.
Now that they're doing their budget now.
Yeah.
Which is probably a good time. If you want to set up a meeting, I can probably get that
Yeah.
from them.
Yeah, that was
So I'd like to see if we can get that.
about 2 weeks ago, so
Okay, yeah,
I mentioned it.
yes, just recently.
Yeah, at this point, I think we had 9 dogs in today. We have 12 kennel spaces. How can we meet needs throughout the community, but if there's options there, essentially if we have 1 or 2 dogs, you've got close, you have to have somebody there. You have to have somebody to feed them. You have to have, you're providing vet care, and we have a robust animal control program, which is what we're providing now and doing investigations. You need that other staff that's in there on weekends and evenings and mornings to feed the animals, clean the kennels, make sure they're being cared for. A dog just thrown in the kennel and kept there for 6 months isn't adoptable, right? Just isn't. Those are some of the tough decisions we have to make, though. How long do you maintain an animal in the animal shelter without moving on from that? What is the community's appetite for incurring those costs long term? There's an article in the Olympian just about a week ago, specifically about Thurston County Animal Control, and they were exactly in the same boat. They're at capacity, they're using some foster programs, but the animals just aren't moving what they were before, and they're increasing costs. Vet costs are increasing. We have had some luck working with Humane Society in Mason County, which is great, with some vet services, and scheduling that, it's driving an animal to Belfair, driving back and forth and getting that and taking somebody off the streets here to do that at the same time is, it's all an impact on services. So.
Well, it's absolutely wonderful that we do have this $2.8 million to use to balance 25 and keep services as is. Yes, 26 is going to be a different story, probably. We'll probably have to start addressing that this coming year as well. But I'm okay with the priority list number 1. I'm also would like to add that patrol officer, if we can move that back over to priority 1, and we can worry about the lieutenant maybe in another year, maybe 26 if things get a little bit better. But I mean, we're not here to make money or make a profit. So we have this $2.8 million, we call one-time money. And yes, we're going to use it. I'd rather use it for big projects, but unfortunately, we have, pay staff is, and the enterprise funds make sense. And I had something else down here. I think it was before, but yes. So, I mean, it's there to use. It would be nice if it was for a big project, but unfortunately, it's not in the cards this year. So I think we should use it to maintain services as is and go with all the priority 1 list.
And look at public safety as much.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd like to move that patrol officer. I think we need a patrol officer on the streets. Using the squally as much as we do. And, when you got 2, one's got to leave and then one's by themselves. So.
Yeah, we're hoping we should have an officer off field training here fairly soon, and then a new entry level that's at the academy right now.
Yeah.
That certainly starts. It starts us in the right direction, but there's still some time for Officer Green to be on the streets on its own.
Right.
I wanted to make sure that we maintained our staffing levels. It's really deleterious when we lose a staff member and then you have to replace them. We lose any chance of momentum of growing or replacing that staff member, especially considering we're a smaller entity and we can't really compete with all surrounding municipalities paying higher wages. So if we were to lose somebody, it's a long-term loss, and it'll hinder any chances of getting momentum back to growing again. Additionally, if we do hire in the future, I think someone like a grant writer makes sense to bring in more money, so we can get a return on our investment when we do more hiring. Someone to look after, especially looking after our B&O taxes as well. Someone that could bring in revenue would be a big boon. And if there's no revenue to be found, then at least we look at it. But I want to make sure that we keep our staff here, happy and working, and that's part of good government is we're governing of the people, by the people, for the people. And most of our costs are staffing, so that's really true. that's, we are government of people and not necessarily things. And we can keep a good staff of people, that it's the most important thing we can do.
I think succession planning is when you lose staff right now and you don't have the succession planning in place, yeah, you have a large gap in providing that service. So you're bringing in somebody after the fact, getting them trained, hopefully to provide that service, and that takes some time. There's not that succession planning.
And the institutional knowledge as well. Someone that brings the experience, someone like yourself who brings 30 years of park experience into this position. Any of the staff that's been here for a certain number of years has developed, like, this is what Shelton wants and needs, and I think that's a really good experience to have. Rather than trying to recreate something that was lost. So, once again, if we can keep our staffing, that would.
Institutional knowledge can be a burden, believe me.
Feedback line, do you have any mentorship or any internship programs available this year or the college to kind of help with maybe some of these positions or training within?
Not in place formally at this time. We had an intern in the planning department over the summer, an intern starting in police department. Soon, yeah, it's beginning of September. I talked to the guidance counselor at Cedar High School last week. Because they still have culminating projects at Cedar High School, which I think Shelton High School at least kind of. I think got rid of those several years ago, which were great, and at least that, it wasn't long term, it wasn't really short term, but it was, you know, at least you could engage with somebody that may want to pursue that career path and take an interest in municipal government, some function of municipal government. So I'm hoping there's some fruit to bear from that relationship. That is something that absolutely it takes interns take time. You know, you have to manage them, take time because they're coming in really with no work experience at all. So you have to have the ability to manage those individuals, and there is some cost associated with your paying LI.
Yeah, they're actually, there's Jeff Slakey is actually looking at this program in the schools right now. He actually called us last week.
Good.
But it's early.
Yeah.
Don't know the details yet.
I've got a couple of questions. You had mentioned the library deck that you may be able to use the re-tax for that. Is there a possibility of like the deck cleaning or anything else falling into that category, or do you think it would just be the deck?
Yeah, it's so. There's a distinguish between maintenance and what's the term, Mike? I think improvements or something.
Yeah, ongoing versus
So you
the
can
one-time.
replace an HVAC unit, but you can't necessarily go in and.
The maintenance of.
Clean the carpet or
Right,
anything.
yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
That makes
So
sense.
so maybe some HVAC replacement, the deck replacement, things like the fencing project over here would fall into. Those types of projects. Potentially even we have $80,000 budgeted right now for the replacement of the uninterrupted power supply system here in the Civic Center. It's the bridge between the power going out and the generator. Battery system, again, 25 years old. And we budgeted that out of the general fund already. It's in our capital improvement fund, and potentially shifting some refunds of that, bringing that up too. So we're gonna do a little more work
You
there.
mentioned maybe the fire alarm panel.
And maybe the fire alarm panel too. A little more research on that, and we frankly, in my experience here, haven't used refunds for projects such as that. They've traditionally, REIT 2, I believe, is dedicated to streets.
And which we've
typically.
used
Yeah,
pretty dedicated towards really specific capital projects.
yeah.
So,
And REIT 1 is dedicated to the debt service on the fire station.
but there is some additional in there, and that's where.
Yeah, we have a fund balance.
Excuse
So if that's acceptable, obviously this will be presented through budget or either supplemental budget or the 25 budget. If that's acceptable, council will certainly refine what kind of projects might bring forward.
Any other questions?
Oh, the public good one?
Let everybody else have a chance first. Anybody else?
I guess just clarifying question. So the enterprise vehicle fund, is that in general just a fund that we want to put together to maintain vehicles all across the board, or is it if we choose to go down the route of doing the enterprise leasing?
If we choose to go down the route, yeah. If we just purchase the way we're purchasing now, we purchase those outright, budgeted, and then you don't really need the account moving forward now. Establishing what is it, equipment revolving fund,
And
replacement,
an ER&R.
replacement fund, we had an analysis done of that a couple years ago, and it was, what kind of investment?
Well, they estimated an initial investment of at least $500,000 to $600,000, and then it's a transfer of somewhere around that annually to try to get it caught up to where we would need to be.
Yeah.
And that's not just out of the general fund, that was
No.
looking at our fleet across the board, but that was a staggering number. None of us deny we need to do it. It's just how do we pay for it and maintain services and staffing levels we have.
And so that's essentially a fleet management, an internal fleet management program, right? So
Right.
you purchase the vehicles out of the ER&R fund, and then the department pays an annual rental, if you will, of that vehicle. Once it's based on its term, so if it lasts 8 years or 10 years, you develop a rental rate on that vehicle. After the end of the life of that vehicle, 8 years or 10 years, you have
Saved enough.
save enough money for the replacement of that vehicle. We don't have that in place now. We purchase a vehicle as allocated through the budget and the council's approval. Purchase that vehicle, it's there until,
Wheels fall off.
We do have
Looks
an
like we get-
EM&R fund for some of our bigger equipment,
Yeah.
like the Vector truck and the dump
Dump
trucks, but even at that,
Yeah.
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 Enterprise wouldn't replace a street sweeper, it's really for your white fleet, police vehicles, those sorts of. Fleet of.
Anything else? Shannon or George, anything? Right, Miguel?
The opioid fund, could we use that for our alternative core in any capacity?
Maybe,
We'd have to look at it.
or like. Maybe,
Used for what? I just.
oh, for like a drug court,
Therapeutic.
therapeutic court, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe, I would think you might be able to.
it's
Yeah.
specific to treatment services, education,
Prevention, yeah.
prevention. I can't recite it all off the top of my head, but there certainly may be a segment there.
If the judge orders a certain type of treatment to not be properly.
Yeah. Yeah, great question. Well,
Yeah, we do have a grant for treatment court,
We
and
do.
we do have, there is money left over, I probably understand, so.
Yeah.
But that's good.
we haven't, the the initial allocation. But a couple years ago, I think,
Started.
the
yeah.
settlement was transferred to Mason County Public Health. That still hasn't been expended by Mason County Public Health, and they haven't heard a plan on how that would be expended. So we're holding the money at this point. If there is a plan within that department that helps community, we can come back to the council and get approval on how to expend those. We don't have any specific services right now that I felt fit the criteria for those funds, but therapy may be an option.
Right. So are you looking for us to,
Well, I'm not done yet.
oh, okay,
We have one.
Yeah,
you have more?
I want to talk a little bit about transportation benefit district. You saw the $8,000 that was proposed for the ballot measure. The transportation benefit district sunsets in April of 26. It is just over $700,000 annually that supports the street fund. If we had to, we're proposing a 1.8 for $20-25 million street fund budget.
1.586.
1.58, so you'd see how that would essentially, about 60% of the street fund or so without those funds. It can go back to the voters in the community. That we're going to communicate how those funds are better used. Right now, we've got a project up on Capitol Hill, Fogarty, and a couple other streets that are being prepped for paving right now in partnership with the county. We need to make sure the community understands what the benefit is from those transportation benefit district funds. So we'll be communicating that.
The roundabout, North Cliff
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Alder Street.
Yeah,
and
there's some.
all
there,
that stuff,
Some that are on
TBD money.
Western Gateway. So if we need to start planning that essentially now, though. If, once that sunset, if the community approves it, the allocation can start to be collected in January, April, or July. And DOR needs 70 days in advance to start collecting that. So you have to have the ballot measure approved, certified, and then 70 days to notify DOR for collection. So if you work backwards, we potentially could have something on the ballot at the end of the year in November and still meet that, what could be April allocation. But we certainly have to plan, because we have to get a ordinance passed and to the auditor by 60
days before the
60 days
election.
before the election. Is that right, Mike?
Or,
Yeah.
there's a lot of timelines we're gonna have to meet in order to keep that TBD revenue flowing
Yeah.
seamlessly next year.
Yeah. And how many of these projects would we have not have done without that TBD the last 10 years? I bet you, everything.
A lot,
So,
right?
Including maintenance.
yeah, and
Including-
it's 0.2%, so it's
0.2%.
what, 2 cents for $20 or something like that?
Maintaining a current.
So
And then maintain, yeah.
it's I'm
So I guess if, at least, at this point, if there's kind of a head nod that we would come back at a study session, provide you more information, some more succinct timelines. And start working backwards from when the existing TBD sunsets, so you've got more information. That staff will know better how to proceed, and give you the information you need, whether you want to move forward or not.
yeah, my head nod.
I'd be curious about more information.
Okay.
Yeah.
We talked about public safety and mental health and DCR services. I think Councilmember Gutierrez brought up in the subcommittee meeting how important those services are in our community. We're currently funded through a grant through DMPHO. We haven't received notification that grant's going to be renewed at this point. So that's one kind of caveat here, about $100,000 expense if that isn't provided. I have heard from our first responders, public safety, council members, individuals in the public, how important that service is. I want to maintain that service. I've heard Councilmember Gutierrez said if we have the resources to expand that service, that we should look into that too. There may be some opportunities part of the county or some other providers as well to expand upon that service in our community, because it's not provided 24/7. There's no time for the one DCR we have in the house. So
I also think this should be prioritized in front of a patrol officer, because even if we got a patrol officer, they would not be able to admit them if we don't have a DCR. So DCR should be the first priority before extra patrol officer.
Oh, absolutely. We need to support the DCR program. It's been a huge success. And you hear nothing but good things, even from the sheriff's department, which, so if it wasn't being funded by grant, definitely the county should be pitching in some money for a DCR, because their co-responders call our DCR, so for commitment. So they definitely should be pitching in a little bit, but I'm hopeful that we'll get another grant funded DCR.
I'm hopeful,
So-
excuse me, I guess I didn't tell you the rest of the story. TMDHO believes they will have the
Yeah.
funding, yes. I want to see it, show me the money from the famous line from Jerry Maguire, show me the money first and a commitment. That's, you know, we want to be strategic with this budget and conservative with this budget until we see those funds. We see a commitment. I believe, you know, 90% is going to be there, but I want to see it before we actually make that commitment. I'll reach out back out to TNBGO and see if they have opportunities to expand that service, whether it's full-time, part-time, or within other partnerships in the county as well. I know those resources are being utilized more and more throughout our entire region, you know, and the need for mental health professionals is great. So I don't know I don't know what the opportunity is out there, but we can certainly ask and see what kind of abatement. Like I said, we allocated $80,000 for abatement this year. The cleanup, the 2 cleanup events come out of that, and then we've obviously had the one house that's been demolished. We hope to see a lien from a property back in 2013 that we abated and tore down. We received lien money this year from a house on East Street, so some revenue coming back in the general fund based on those, and hopefully as the housing market increases and property values are up, that people want these properties once they go, typically it's tax foreclosure. So
When we get abatement money back, can we just stick it back into abatement automatically, or does it go to the general fund and then the council down the road has to allocate it back towards abatement? I think it should go right back into abatement fund and well, you know,
You don't really have a fund,
okay,
just a line item in general.
line item in the community development.
because I heard that they're
budget.
gonna auction off this property down here in Railroad, so that's gonna get us back, what, $25,000?
You know, over $30,000, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So code enforcement and abatement is funded out of the general fund. So it essentially, without having a dedicated fund,
Okay.
it essentially supports it already. Absolutely. Unfortunately, the more we abate, fortunately or unfortunately, the more revenue that may come in the general fund. We'd much rather be more proactive in our code enforcement, so the houses don't get to that condition, right? And we have to go in and abate because it's a heck of a lot more expensive and there's a lot more impact to our community and neighbors when they end up in a condition like that, 1411 property. So be more proactive upfront, trying to get voluntary compliance, and just, for lack of a better term, bulldogging it. You know, a lot of these properties, it's multiple contacts, whether it's absentee owners or you don't even know who the owner is in the case of the railroad property. So back to the library and museum, I think I heard from the subcommittee at least to have a conversation with Timberland Regional Library to see what the opportunities are. I'll tell you that our agreement with Timberland isn't any different than the cities and counties within their district. They're providing facilities, custodial and maintenance services, utilities at the same time. Again, that doesn't mean we can't have that discussion to see what kind of opportunities may present itself for some relief of our expenditures for that building. Yeah, I mean, is that,
Oh, I'm absolutely would like to look at our contracts. We should be providing custodial service when we can't even have enough custodians here in the city. So I think they can, you know, we give them building, we're paying the light bill and the water and sewer. I think they can clean their own bathrooms. I mean, they have their own funds, their own taxing, so I'm not sure why we're cleaning their bathrooms for them.
right?
Well, they say no.
No, yeah, right, absolutely. I mean, we can have that discussion. Obviously, libraries are critical to a community. They provide critical services. We want to be good partners with them because it brings people into our community. They they visit businesses. They participate in activities in our community at the same time. we have to be creative on how we're providing all of our services, and that if that's in public safety and streets, I think that it boils over into library services at the same time. Now, we've reduced some of our maintenance within the landscaping. As you've seen, we've been lucky enough to get some grant money to do some repairs outside. The library TRL has committed to renovating the public restrooms. Last year, they made some improvements as well inside with some paint and flooring and things like that. That we certainly weren't able to do, but it's that ongoing day-to-day maintenance that can be a burden for us. And we've reduced our level of service, we've reduced our custodial staff. Moving on to the museum, we briefly had a discussion last year when the museum, the Historical Society, Mason County Historical Society approached the council for approval of a longer term lease when they were going to apply for the grant for expansion. It's one thing I started that conversation about, at least paying for utility services and things like that with the Historical Society. That lease agreement expires in a little over a year. So we're at least gonna have to explore that lease before long, but it's probably worth starting that conversation now, and whether they have long-term plans of staying in that building and maybe receiving ownership potentially, or how maybe that building can serve their needs and maybe relieve the burden on the city's general fund at the same time.
Conversation worth having.
Okay. Going down my list. Fire district annexation, again, this is probably a longer term discussion. It essentially doesn't change services in the city. The fire district provides, Central Mason Fire provides the same services. What it does is it changes tax collection. So the Central Mason would, if the annexation was voted on in favor by city residents, as well as everybody in the current Central Mason district, then they would be the taxing authority within the city of Shelton. It would relieve the city's burden of paying out of our general fund for fire services. The city can do several things, right? Because you don't have that burden on the general fund anymore. You can reduce your tax collection, you can change it to a certain amount for whatever services, but those are the kind of decisions have to be made, or you can reduce it completely. So that, you know, it's essentially a net zero for the ratepayers, for taxpayers. In some communities, they have kept a portion of that for services in the city, but you have to communicate that with your public, have to fully inform them of what that decision is and see what kind of support you might have. So
Will we still pay fire marshal services in annexation?
Nope, as well as ownership of the fire station. And then right now, our agreement is that we pay half of equipment, half of their cost of equipment in the city too. So that really less of that burden long term.
About 2 fire trucks in the last few years.
And there's a ladder truck that just purchased this year. Yeah, exactly right. So we're fortunate enough to have a great relationship with Central Mason, and they're taking payments on that ladder truck, not a one-time payment. They're taking payments over a number of years. And I think that, you know, frankly, once the city decided to contract those services, there's no going back, right? So it's not like we're gonna go start a fire department anytime soon and make that investment. So we need to maintain that relationship and have every, you know, there's no reason to think that we won't maintain that relationship, but is it more efficient? And more, is there more clarity in Central Mason just providing that service and annexing the city of Shelton upfront rather than having kind of the pass through from the city? I think that's ultimately the discussion.
Taking pressure off staff here too.
A little bit, I mean, it's, you know. Sure.
One less thing you gotta count, Mike.
There you go.
Yeah,
One
exactly
last
right.
line.
We talked a little bit about affordable housing sales tax. One of the sales tax is available to the city specifically for affordable housing programs. This can be used in in many different ways, what it needs to be, but the housing needs to be deed restricted in some sort or there's some very specific requirements that need to be to meet the RCW. It potentially gives the city a tool to encourage some affordable housing by, we could offset some development costs, as far as GFCs. We can put in some infrastructure improvements like frontage improvements or something like that, that are a burden for some of our affordable housing providers. We could save some of the money, you know, use that as incentive for affordable housing provider. Council member staff sent me some information today from the Department of Commerce on a CHIP grant, which is a grant that can build infrastructure for affordable housing projects. There's up to $1 million available for specific grants. To be eligible for those, you have to have an affordable housing sales tax adopted and in place.
Be used for mitigation, pallet shelter type site
Potentially,
operations.
potentially, yeah. Yeah, a number of things, transitional housing, permanent supportive housing. Yeah, really the spectrum of affordable housing, certainly. We would, you know, much like the TBD, we do some research, present some opportunities where these funds could be expended, what we felt like the biggest need is, look at some of our affordable housing providers locally, regionally, to see what, you know, what the priorities might be in the community. We have a housing needs assessment the county just finished, the updated net housing needs assessment that shows us the need for these variable housing projects, and bring something back to the council in a study session to consider further. All right, please.
Commerce also put out another email just after that one that says that they have a grant for operations and maintenance costs for these housing projects.
Two more things on my list, if you'll bear with me. We talked a little bit about capital needs in parks. And the Shelton Metropolitan Park District is just like the general fund of the city of Shelton. We collect general tax revenue that is limited to the 1%. Our expenses are exceeding our revenue, and we'll have less and less money to put into replacement of equipment or capital projects. There's a couple ways to address that. Right now, our subdivisions are required to provide neighborhood parks. That's great. When we're talking about trails, water access, community parks, skate parks, splash pads, replacement of the playground at the inland park, those are the capital funds that need to be supplanted to hopefully provide those community assets. That can be done through an impact fee on housing starts. Affordable housing starts could be eliminated for that or significantly reduced. The way that's calculated is you take the CIP, your capital improvement program, determine how many houses you anticipate to be built. It's just like a general facility charge for water or sewer. It's charged based on potentially the size of the house or the use, and then that is kept as a fund, and that is spent on the capital improvements based on your CIP in the community. Or potentially a levy lid lift. The SMP is collecting somewhere at just over 50 cents per thousand right now. They have the ability to collect 75 cents per thousand. That's a vote of the public as well to meet some of those capital needs.
So a levy lid lift would be on the existing homes, and a impact fee would just be on development. So I would probably be more interested in impact fee on development for parks, rather than raise some of these property taxes.
Either or.
Yeah, impact fee. So let me be clear, impact fee can be established by council. The levy lid lift would have to go
Yeah.
by people. Yeah, and then, yeah, I mean, these can be certainly mutually exclusive. Yeah, absolutely. They're two separate processes. Yeah. By all means.
Did you get enough on that one?
Would the council consider a presentation at a study session on impact fees? At least to learn more about it. Okay, great. Yeah, absolutely. Good. And the last is homeless services. We haven't captured this in a budget previously. This has kind of been absorbed in whatever budget, whether it's parks, whether it's streets, if it's water facilities. Whether we're mitigating some encampments, whether we're just cleaning up garbage, whether it's a porta potty that's over here in the parking lot. I'd like to establish at least a fund where we can allocate some funds there, we can track that appropriately to the service we're providing. We also have within our timesheets, we're tracking that, so we know specifically where we're putting our resources and how those are being spent. In the subcommittee, additional public restrooms were mentioned as well and discussed a little bit. We haven't had a majority of the council that I think has directed us to go on that route, but we need to gather some data here. We need to know exactly what we're spending, how it's being affected, what departments are being affected. It's quite often, frankly, it's not equitable. The Parks Department bears the burden of the costs at all times. So my thought is it should come from the general fund, specifically when you're talking about parks or water facilities or our facilities, sewer facilities, and places like that. But I'm certainly
you're saying that-
discussion.
So you're saying like if we have to go, we're cleaning up Brewer Park. We obviously get a mess there from time to time.
Yeah.
We would charge that off the general fund rather than
Right.
parks, and if we were cleaning up below the tank up on the hill, we'd be using water department or a general fund to relieve water department funds.
Exactly right.
Well, that makes sense, I guess. I mean, put the cost where it needs to be and not burden the departments that are trying to survive as well on what we give them, so. Yeah,
Do we have a good accounting of how much we pay in homeless services per year? So basically, if we create this allotment for those, we can say we spent this much money doing these sorts of things, and then we can proactively plan what we actually want to do with that money as opposed to just being reactive.
That's the idea.
That's the intent. Thank you for.
Set up some budget.
I like it.
yeah,
It wouldn't necessarily be a fund, it would be
No,
budget lines
line
that we
items.
could charge to.
Yeah, exactly. And we're using existing staff, right?
Yeah.
They're here, they're being paid, whether they're in parks or whether water fund at this point, but. So we're not hiring any additional staff at this point. I mean,
probably good.
It'd be nice at some point, right? And there's community downtown ambassadors and things like that, but it's not in the cards at this point. We're using existing staff, but we want to succinctly track our expenditures there, so we have better data for the council to make more informed decisions.
Well, at this point, correct me if I'm wrong. Because we're doing the cleanups and the different things, that money is being taken from. Maybe we could have hypothetically done the playground equipment, maybe we would have had the money in there, but we had to spend it other way.
It certainly affects. It certainly affects what we can do physically in maintenance, right? If we're spending whatever, I mean, you know, the elephant in the room is the park. If we're spending 2 hours, you know, a day down there, it's 2 hours a day. We're not spending someplace else. We're not spending that at Newland Park account and park or someplace else. So absolutely, it's deferring maintenance is what it's doing.
Well, and the money that we're paying for dump fees and for
Yeah.
debris removal, that money is being used for, new park services and. improvements.
Let alone public safety, right? Because that's someplace we're not tracking it at all either.
Is this something we can use the opioid fund for as well? Or is it not?
I don't know how to succinctly tie it to that, just because if we're cleaning, let me look at that a little more. I didn't see how we could, because I thought, I mean, I immediately thought, well, let's try to put some of this into our public safety department, right? And I just didn't see under the settlements where that succinctly tied.
It's a big issue in county health as well, or public health as well. I think if we're doing a lot of cleanups and especially having to do porta potties. The amount of waste that we could divert from going into the water system. Or down the drain, or in our parks. I don't know, if we could somehow define. Cleanup as part of public health and safety.
The opioid settlement is very specific
Yeah.
on things like education and prevention and things like that, and so cleanup doesn't fall under any of those, so you just have to be very, very careful. How you use those funds.
That's my list.
That's your
I
list.
said, bear with me, right? I'm gonna get you out of here before 8, I think. We'll see.
So did you get a consensus on if we're going to use a 2.8 and fund operations as is with the priority 1 list? From us? Or is that where we're going with that, or do you need that information right now?
We need that to move forward. I
Yeah.
didn't hear any opposition.
Yeah.
So I guess. Please, if that's the case, we obviously have a little bit of tweaking within the priority 1 requests. That you see here rather than the one time. So we still have a little movement to do. We're gonna have another month or so of data. Maybe 2 months of data.
Right.
Of this year's data that's gonna show us a little more to base some of these decisions on, but. We're fairly confident where we're at, and we're comfortable in these numbers moving forward. With the information we have in front of us today.
I think where our work is cut out for us as department heads is out of this list.
Yeah.
What do we fund?
That's
Because that's not included in there. So,
that's where things are gonna be moved.
because these are ongoing costs, and so where do we, what do we do in order to keep programs maintained at their current level, given these requests?
So Basin,
Expensive cookies.
We're talking 26, so right?
Pardon me?
We're talking 26. Well, under my impression that if we were to go ahead with and use part of the 2.8, like it's planned here. In priority 1, and then that gets us through 2025, but then we got to start worrying about 2026 and what we're gonna do there.
We didn't include these tasks
Right.
that are on this
Those aren't
part of
included
the
yet.
budget right here. So we've also got to say, what of these things are we going to do? And that's where Mark was mentioning, if we can allocate some REIT money towards some of the capital projects, that would free some of that up. But these, I would really call most of these ongoing expenses. These aren't. Requests from departments really aren't any one time in here.
But we don't have the money for ongoing expenses, so, I mean, that's
right.
where
We're-
I'm going.
Yes, exactly. We're essentially propping up the 25 budget with, if we funded these ongoing expenses or a portion of them.
With the,
We're propping up those ongoing expenses with in-fund balance for 1 year.
Yeah.
And then we're reassessing it.
Correct.
We hope we have new revenue streams. Yes, am I counting on it? I'm not gonna do that.
No.
We're gonna prepare
and we're still gonna have that $500,000 left over of unreserved money that we should
unreserved money.
just keep it there.
Yep, we hope, at the end of the year, we, even budgeting conservatively, we hope to have some unexpended balance at the end of the year. That's-
Can't overspend.
Yeah,
So
exactly
hope
right.
to be slightly under.
So we hope to be under, if we spent to the adopted budget every year, it's much easier to plan accordingly. But that isn't the case, and things change throughout the year, but with any luck, you have a little bit of unexpended balance that goes into your, your reserve fund. You can use those for one-time expenses down the road. But again, I'm not gonna count on those for ongoing expenses.
We're projecting conservatively, especially with the new B and O, tax increase. Is there an idea of where we're at with our realized income from that versus what it would have been if we just doubled what we saw last year, or in that sort of sense, so that we can kind of say, this would be the high end, this is where we are, and there's this much wiggle room in that budget, just to kind of understand.
Sure, do you want maybe at the September monthly financial to delve into that a little bit and show kind of where we're at year to date? Roughly prior to with the old percentage, it was about $800,000. We budgeted this year for about 1.3 million. So we didn't expect that it would double simply because some of the annual payers, we don't see that money until the following year. I increased it a little more in 2025, but based on what we've seen, we're just not convinced that it's double.
Yeah,
And
well,
so-
it's not.
That's where we really feel like having this, either an analyst or the company that we're able to talk to, come in and take a look at things and say, is there, are we able through our system we have to generate some letters to business license holders and balance some of these things? I don't know. That may help us at the very least make businesses aware that we're trying to be equitable, that we care about it. I just right now don't think it'll be doubling.
No, Sierra Pacific told me the other day that even with the increase in B and O, but the cost of lumber is so cheap right now that they're paying less money right now than they were before we doubled it, because their retail or the cost of board is really cheap right now. So,
And we have seen it level out a little bit. We had some trouble with a couple of big retailers. They have corporate headquarters outside of the state. They just didn't catch up with it. They are now. And so you saw the June financial report presentation. It's about where we expected budget to be this year. So that's why I'm hesitant to say that it'll be completely double.
Right.
As I've told Mark, I hope to be wrong on that, and that we can add a couple $100,000 to the budget when we go into 2026, but I would rather come to you that way than say, oops, we overestimated and we need to now drop revenue back even more. So I just want to be realistic about it, and that's really kind of where it's coming in at this point.
I greatly appreciate that. I was just curious.
No, I appreciate
That's
that.
great, yeah.
Because we really need everybody to understand it, because it's.
And I think the simple thing to do is just say, okay, let's double it from the previous year, right? But I appreciate Mike's approach. Let's look at it a little more closely and say, what's realistic and conservative. Let's look at it more closely and make sure that we're not over projecting, because that could, happen.
That's how we keep people employed, so it's the best way to go.
Yeah,
And I did increase it a bit for modestly for 2025, because I do anticipate in January, well, that first quarter, when we get those payments in, that will, but I also. I just want to make sure, and I think we'll know a little bit more, and we can report back after a meeting with the company we're going to talk to tomorrow afternoon, and see what kinds of things they could recommend to us. We really did hear from the task force that they would like us to, the businesses that pay and pay on time, it's a fair matter of fairness and equity. That is the city really going out there and saying, okay, you sent a return last year, but you didn't this year. Are you not doing business in the city? Those kinds of things. And we just don't have the staff to do that right now, but how do they expect to be compensated for that? We need more information.
and essentially, hopefully, that's kind of a one-time exercise.
Hopefully, yes.
And then we've established, a comprehensive list. We understand who may have been, may not have been paying, we can.
And maybe set up some processes that are straightforward for finance to be able to send out through our software that we have, some letters, that reconcile some of this. Like I said, you have a business license, we noticed you didn't file a business and occupation tax return. Just to check on some of it, so that those businesses that are know that we're being fair. And trying to be equitable.
The B and O tax is also based on gross receipts, so our economy also tells us what we're gonna get as well, so if we had a dip in our economy and people quit buying stuff, then.
Yeah.
Or they're going to Olympia and buying their stuff rather than buying it local, so,
Online shopping,
well, at least we get sales tax while online shopping,
absolutely.
at least, that wasn't always the case, that's probably state cities across the country.
Certainly.
During the state during COVID, otherwise,
Oh,
cities probably would have gone bankrupt all over the place. But, are we gonna have any new discussions? We're gonna extend this meeting, anybody? Okay, so whenever you're ready, just want to make sure we don't have any discussion.
Ready when you are.
So do we have a new discussion tonight? All right, then this study session is adjourned at seven PM. Right, I was gonna extend it if you're gonna have a new discussion.
Oh.
I was gonna, like.
We need another hour, come on.
Absolutely. I told you I'd keep you here all night, right? We'll be done in 20.